Hello and welcome to the Blood and Pigment channel. The Raise the Black expansion for Blood and Plunder has been out for a while now, and we're going to start a new series on this channel looking at each chapter of that book and what new things it brings to the game. I'm Joseph here with Guy and Dan. What chapter are we looking at today, Dan?
Today we're looking at the Spanish chapter. Raise the Black brings Blood and Plunder into the 18th century, and Spain gets some major updates. How is Spain different in Raise the Black compared to how they play in the core rulebook and No Peace Beyond the Line, Guy?
Well, the Spanish in the 17th century of No Peace Beyond the Line and the core rulebook was very much an empire decline with poorly equipped troops, with outdated weapons, and a lot of lack of training all around. In Raise the Black, Spain has worked to update their equipment and training and made an attempt to catch up with the other European powers. You'll still find pockets of poorly trained and poorly equipped troops in the empire, but now they have a baseline of training and equipment that brings them up to the level of their peers.
Which is kind of nice because we've always complained about Spain being kind of left in the dust, which is authentic but kind of annoying for playing the game. So I think this brings some good stuff to the game. First faction we'll look at is the Spanish Army, and this is one of the new force types that is found for most of the nations in Raise the Black, more of a official army style list. This list features well-trained troops, pretty limited selection of core units, but you're going to get your socket bayonets, which are pretty deadly. You're going to get a good resolve, little braver troops. The Spanish Army is actually more interesting than most of the British or the French army faction because you have a couple of different ways you can use your core units. You can use the Soldados Armados, which are your basic Spanish soldier troop, or the frontier version of it, a little less expensive but not as well equipped, Soldados de Avanzada. Or you can use the European regulars, which have a little bit different twist on things, as well as they hired a lot of mercenaries. Still a ton of support options, and the Spanish have a little more flexibility as far as how many support units they can bring. We got about 3 interesting commanders, a really big, powerful one, and then the governor of Florida, Zuniga, is a fun commander and more of a frontier kind of sneaky guy as well. You also can play this as a cavalry faction, but it doesn't take use of its good force rules if you do that. So I'd do that in militia. The force rule, the new thing is you can kind of coordinate your entire force a little easier. You can do a massive, they call it a platoon action, where you all move or you all shoot or you all reload for based on your commander. So you have a little more coordination, a little more, but it's kind of a smaller force because all your units are more expensive.
The platoon level actions are good, but just like you said, Joseph, they are expensive.
Yeah, a lot of stuff we could talk about with that platoon action, but for the purpose of this video, let's keep it short and brief and look at the Armada.
The Spanish Armada, it's a very good naval faction. This is one of the first, like the other nationalities, where it is going to be their quote-unquote Royal Navy. They're very aggressive with a +4 when determining the attacker, which means you'll usually be the attacker in a scenario. Core units are basically sailors, so you have some Sombreros, Vizcanos, they're like your elite sailors, which every nation now gets one, not just the Dutch. And they focus mainly on gunnery, because you can upgrade each sailor unit to have expert artillery crew for 4 points. But because Spain is also really good in combat, you can build a boarding list around this, and it is nasty. It is a very good faction and very aggressive, which is the key thing here.
Have you used this faction much yet, Guy?
I've used this faction extensively, the artillerymen being a core unit and having the ability to go to veteran for 4 points and getting expert artillery crew. That is a game changer a lot with this faction. You can also play it on land to give all of your force field guns with artillerymen, because that's what they do. And on land, issue gunnery level things to everything within range.
Shenanigans.
They're good in boats too. They're good in ships. I really like the Spanish Armada faction. It's fun that we finally have a Spanish Armada faction.
Yeah, something besides the scummy guardacostas.
We're the Armada de Barlovento.
Yeah, they are deadly. I fought against them a lot. They are very deadly, very good. If you want a professional seagoing faction, you play Spain, this is the way to go.
Yeah, this army and Armada really open up a whole new chapter for Spain and Blood and Plunder.
It
If you're
did.
tired of playing crap, these guys are great. But you pay for it.
What do you have for us, Guy?
The Spanish Mission Garrison. This is very similar to the other frontier forces, but changed in a couple notable ways. They have a new terrible Spanish mission militia unit, which is the Miscellaneous Indios de la Florida, which are they're really bad, but they're only 3 points each, and they come armed with bows. You can give them a musket, but they get slow reload, and you should keep the bows, in my opinion. This faction also has a couple of really unique things go for it that are both good and bad. This is I call them the religious fanatics faction because that's what it feels like. You get a bonus if you bring a priest or a spiritual leader, which they have the new mission priest that comes in the Rays of Black. That's a boon for Spain and Portuguese. And the command options for Spanish Mission Garrison are really strong too. You can take any of the generic commanders; those guys are good. You can have Francisco Romero de Areza, which is a kind of a heavier commander for you. But the one that everybody is talking about is Father Angel Miranda. And because he's only 10 points and he has a bunch of abilities for only 10 points, but only comes with one command point. But in this faction, which is the only faction he can lead in, he gets 2 command points because that's what the faction does. So this is a really fun faction to play. You're going to be doing a lot of the Miscellaneous Indios de la Florida as your core unit and shooting with bows in a horde-like way, in a way that Spain has tried to do with Milicianos, but never really been able to. So I like it. I played this faction about 4 times so far, and I've enjoyed it every time.
They're horrible, but somehow they win, and that's quite delightful.
You bring more bodies and you have musket shots, so
This is the best place for Rain of Arrows too, because it's actually good in this faction compared to where it was with the Caribbean factions, which had it before. You kind of had to sacrifice a lot because it's usually better to shoot twice. But in this faction, you might as well give Rain of Arrows to your units. It's so much better. But Joseph, what's the next one?
The Franco-Spanish Expeditionary Force. So in Queen Anne's War, the French and the Spanish worked together at some level. Had a couple different expeditions they worked together. Never very successful, but they did do it. So this is an interesting faction where it mixes Spain and French units. So we could say this is remarkable because it's the first time Spain has got access to good units because it can play French units now. Very overpowered. It doesn't have a lot of tricky abilities. It does have a negative ability where if you have like a Spanish character giving orders to a French unit, they're going to have difficulty with the language barrier. So you have to be careful of that. But you have you have 7 different core units, so a lot of diversity and force building options, 3 different support units, and you can take Pierre Lemoyne de Iberville, who is in every Blood and Plunder book basically. So that's kind of fun. Yeah, it's just fun to mix up units. You can bring Buccaneers as core in a Spanish force, or
Macelsus Caribes as core. I really like this faction when I heard about it. I played it a couple times. It's really fun to mix and match, but having its only special rule being a negative.
Yeah.
Like you can work around it. You can give your Milicianos. You can use the Spanish troops as your melee support that you don't never give command points to, and only give command points to your French units to shoot. That works.
Or you just bring an officer and you have like a different command tree. You have kind of 2 forces working independently. It's fun.
Oh, that's a fun idea. Have them working opposite at the same time and having occasionally, having to shout stuff back and forth. That's kind of a note in a lot of the Spanish stuff is that they will kind of want you to play with the flaws more than previous expansions where it was just always bad. Now, if you want to role play kind of the Spanish, like not having their act together, you have to like choose it. You're not forced to do it.
Yeah, you can work around it. You can compensate for it. You can build a force to minimize weaknesses, which is fun. Back to sea, Dan?
So what we have for Spain is a new edition of the Guardacostas. What makes them really cool is that they can be led by an English, French, Dutch, or unaligned European commander, which is super cool. I think this is the first force that blatantly does this, if I'm not mistaken. But it comes with the basic +2 to determine the attack roll, so it's kind of a baseline. But all your sailors gain the expert sailor special rule, which is awesome. And they all may re-roll a failed grapple throw once per turn, which is fantastic. Granted, all the units gain the poorly equipped special rule, but some of the other commanders will go ahead and override that. It's almost like a combination of Spanish Corsairs and Guardacostas from No Peace Beyond the Line, but you have a plethora of core units because if you bring a commander who is not Spanish, he gets to bring that nation's sailors as core units, and it is really fun. You can run a gun list, but because of that grapple rule, they're really at home boarding.
Yeah, really good boarding faction. The foreign service is fun. You can play any nation under the Spanish flag. You got mercenaries, basically.
Yeah.
If you've never played Spain before, you can do it with your English, French, or Dutch models.
The lighting on guns is great with this faction, but also having the unaligned European one, so you have access to core European sailors with that 6-shoot that you can give muskets to. The French, if you go French, you get the later Flibuze. And the Spanish Corsairs are not a bad option too. There, if you want to like really represent Spain, you get you get rid of poorly equipped essentially.
Yay.
It's a solid faction. It's a lot of fun. Again, I fought these guys a lot, and it's really interesting to see a Spanish flag with an uppity English guy yelling at everybody. It's fantastic. All right, Guy, what do you got for us on land? What kind of new toys you got?
Well, this is actually my favorite of the new factions that I'm going to talk about, which is the Reformed Spanish Militia. Now, this isn't the old Spanish Militia, this is the new one, but it's very similar to the old Spanish Militia, but with better units, more versatile options, lots of force options as well, and just the amount of unit variety is kind of crazy. This has 5 different core units. You have the new milicianos, you have the new milicianos negros, which are either freed blacks or people of mixed heritage or slaves that had been armed that Spain was using. The lanceros are back here as just as good as they always did, hostigadores and core caballeria, so you can have horses core without going in the cinquantine route. Mm-hmm. The force options are though when it becomes really fun, because the first one is you can have Caballero Lancero as a core unit. This is the option that you want to take if you really want those Caballero Lanceros, and makes it so with them as core, your commander would get armed if you use the standard one, just as one of them too. So that's really fun. The guerrilla fighters option allows you to deploy half of your force laying in wait just because, and you get Milicianos Indios as core, but you can't take artillery or mounted units. And then my favorite option out of these is the far-flung outpost. This is what I hit on earlier, where you get to choose when you want to play a crappy Spanish faction. Because
embrace the weakness.
Yes, the far-flung outpost gives all of your units tough for free. They get tough. That's really good. But every time you want to reload, you have to roll a dice. And on 1 through 4, the unit doesn't reload. Now you can cheese this a little bit by playing a whole force like if you do caballeros that only have like a brace of pistols and never have to reload. You could play the whole game that way, and you have tough cavalry the whole game, which is pretty nice. But how I've played this is by playing hostigadores, and let me tell you, I had a unit that had 2 reloads on him on them, and I failed 2 reload checks in a row while I was holed up in a church. I had just been charged and just repulsed a charge with defensive fire, and I was like, okay, I gotta reload these.
Who brought the powder?
I know. That's the kind of fun experience you can have with this force. If you want to like play somebody, like just to try it out and play like a lone outpost, Spanish outpost. They also have the armadillos so they can go to sea even with getting merit arrows for core. Even with a good Guardacosta, it's still there's a lot of options in this one. It's not as different as the last one, right?
The legendary faction. It's always fun to get a legendary faction. Spain gets a new model here, which is Pargo. Pretty interesting character, fun to read up on. A nice bio in the book. Pargo's Marineros. It's kind of a Corsair list, but it also has a big emphasis on cannons. Pargo is kind of rich. You like to upgrade his ship and use big guns. So the real fun part here is all size 3 ships and larger may add up to 3 pairs of additional heavy cannons to their permitted amount. They can't exceed their cannon number, obviously, but usually a size 3 ship can't take any heavy cannons. So here you can get bigger cannons than usual and punch above your weight. It does limit your speed to 4, so if you're playing that light frigate or something, or that sloop of war, you can't hit that 5-inch mark, so a little slower. But you might surprise somebody by blowing them out of the water with some big cannons. Pretty simple, as a lot of legendary forces are pretty strict as far as what units you can bring. You have the Marineros and the Vizcaínos, and then for sport you got Corsarios, Leiden, and European sailors. So really good options all around. He has probably 32 points. Let me just confirm that. 34 points, but he's a big commander. He has 4 fortune and he has Felicitas, so he gets extra fortune every turn if he has spent them all, and he's well equipped. Broadside, inspiring, good set of rules there.
He's a good commander.
You were telling us a story about watching him blowing somebody up, Dan?
Oh yeah, watching one of our players, Martin, who was playing Pargo on a light frigate with 2 pairs of heavy guns and 2 mediums, was fighting Tyler Carlson, the famed Spanish player for this year. He was playing Black Bart, and Martin unloaded his guns from 4 inches away, and it hurt.
Yeah.
It hurt a lot.
You can do some really fun things with Pargo as well. If you're playing a more higher point game and you have the 6 rate, you can do heavy guns on 2 different decks. With him, which is kind of fun, is having going all heavy cannons, because if you do a deck of heavy guns on the 6 rate, you're limited 4 inches anyways, so you might as well. I've only played him once, and it was against boats, and heavy cannons connecting with boats is a sight to behold.
If you can hit them. But you're doing well. You're hitting every other one or something when you should have been hitting like 1 out of 7 or something.
Oh, he gets so many fortune throughout the course of the game. You start with 4. And then when you run out, you get 1 a turn. We're talking usually, I think I only used 7 fortune that game.
Wow.
When you want to use your fortune in the first turn with him, so you can lose that, just like de Graaf and other Felicitas people before him, so you can start getting those fortunes every turn.
Pargo's got some big lead cannonballs.
So Spain overall in Raise the Black, I would say that it brings them up on a power level equal with other factions. I think it's healthy for the game. It might make them a little better than they really were, but it's good to see them at a competitive level. We've seen some people do well with them already in tournaments. I like the variety. We have anything from the Pargos, heavy cannons, all the way down to the not even hardly trained, not warlike Spanish mission militia, just wildly shooting arrows at you, hoping something hits, to the confused Spanish Franco alliance, to the far-flung outposts that don't have any powder, so a lot of fun flavor and interesting things going on.
And mercenaries in there too.
Yeah, mercenaries. Lots of fun flavor.
The main thing is a lot of them got better resolve, which is really important. Resolve used to be a pain in the old Spanish playbook, and now you got some good resolve on top of all these new toys. They're really good.
Looking at the new units, they have 7 new units. We got the Milicianos Reformados, which are basically the same with the new Firelock gun. We have the Milicianos Negros, which are a more expensive version of Milicianos, but they do have that 5 resolve instead of 6. We have the Milicianos Indios de la Florida, which are a worse version of the original Milicianos Indios. We have the Vizcaínos, which are kind of an elite boarding party sailor, really good, kind of interplug kind of style. We've got the Soldados de Avanzada, which are kind of a frontier soldier, kind of a mix between a real soldier and a militia. And they have 5 resolve too. We got the Soldados Reformados and the Granaderos, which we didn't talk about, but a grenadier unit. But nobody with 4 resolve, of course. But we do have a little more 5 resolve mixed in there. So you're right.
5 is good. 5 is great. when you go from 5 to 6, you're surprised.
Sometimes it makes a big difference. Sometimes it doesn't, but there is just 10%.
Yeah, just 10%.
10% gooder.
And I've ran the Miscellaneous Negros a lot with you can give them lances instead of muskets for -1 point, and having a 5 resolve melee specialist unit creeping around is a lot of fun. It's kind of like what Spain needed. Lanceros are great, but at 5 points, you could really only do like one unit of them. Having 4-point melee unit is so good.
Yeah, and you can run a little bit of both too. You can have that Lancero that has the skirmishers and a little more maneuverability, but don't have to pay for them all at 5 points.
No. The Miscellaneous Negros is a good to kind of like layer in with your musket units to protect against a charge, where you would never want to do that with Lanceros because you have so many points wrapped up in the unit.
Overall impression of Spanish and Raise the Black? I'm enjoying it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think this is great. Good for Spain, good for the game.
For more information on the Raise the Black expansion, you can find several articles looking at Raise the Black on our blog, bloodandpigment.com. We have a full article with a brief description of all the factions in the book, along with article and recommendations on how to use all the new plastic sprues to create these new units. And we'll have 500 other articles, everything you can imagine, on Blood and Plunder at bloodandpigment.com.
Check out the rest of our YouTube channel as well. Subscribe and ring the ship's bell so you can stay notified of our uploads. We also have a Patreon as well that you can pledge to. Check it out.
And as always, keep your dice ready to win at your back, your har.